So let's get right to it. And the first thing we've got to do is take off the stock. To do that, we have the safety here on this side with the bolt, and we want to take that off. Can't get the stock off without it being removed. And one trick I learned from Randy Bimrose, who taught airgun repair classes, is to use something like this. And I like this, not to put forks and knives and spoons in, but I like the idea of starting here with the first thing I take off and working my way around major components in these compartments, and that way I can reverse the order when I put it back together, and hopefully it, everything will remain in here and won't be losing anything. There's a stock lug here in the middle that has to come out, and it actually is locked into the stock, so it doesn't actually, it's not something you remove, it is something you would loosen up. And then the other one is a Phillips head here in the rear of the trigger guard, and it does come out. And so then there's the stock comes out. And once we get it to this point, we've been through this, I think, before. We use 4 screws that hold the cover onto the regulator and hold everything in there. This is a number 3 wrench. And there it is. We've been through the regulator, so we don't need to go into that very much. This is, the magazine of course goes in here from this side, and this operates the magazine. Essentially this little magazine follower in here, I think you can see that. This here, this piece here is carried forward when the bolt comes forward. You can see it's got a little slant on it, and that little slanted part engages this, causing it to move upward, which in turn causes this to index the magazine. You would tilt that forward and tilt it out. The bottom section engages with the bolt. And I'm just going to leave it there because sometimes you have to fiddle around with that to get that out. But once we get the barrel off, it'll be should be easier. And in order to get the barrel off, we have 2 grub screws in the front, one here and one here and one here. So we're going to take those out, and that uses a number 2.5. And once that's out, this will just slide out like so. And the barrel also slides right out. And if you notice, there are a couple of, well, this is the transfer port with the O-ring, and then there's a couple of places here where those set screws hold the barrel in place. And now we'll get this piece out. Come on, come on. And that's what it looks like. And as I mentioned, the alignment is important in order to make the magazine work. So it basically goes in with this kind of an orientation. You can see the trigger and whatnot back here, and then the sliding part faces forward, and the thick end faces the bottom of the gun, or since it's upside down, faces up here. The other side has kind of a narrow and small tab on it, and that's the one that fits into the bolt, which is what makes it cycle when you... The next thing is to remove the bolt. And that is a number 5 wrench. And by the way, I caulked it before I did all this, so it makes it a little easier to get the bolt out. And it just unscrews. You can see this thread here just screws into the bolt. And then we have a little bit of a trick here because the bolt has to be rotated. So what we'll do is we'll pull the bolt back. And if you look at the back here, you can't see it there, but there's a, you have to rotate that around just a little bit. And sometimes I'll use a wrench in the port on the bolt to start that rotation. And if you look in the back here, you can see what happens. There's a little dimple here on the bolt. You see that dimple? Yeah, there it is. Now that's normally on the bottom of the bolt. And what you want to do is get that turned so it's facing pretty much straight up off to the top of the receiver. So right about there ought to do it. And when you do that, you can simply push the bolt out. Push the bolt out here, and then once it gets out a certain distance, you can just pull it. And you'll hear something here. There's a spring and a ball in there, ball bearing. And those have just let loose. So there's the bolt. And one thing you notice, it's got these two flanges here, I guess you call them. This one is the one that cycles the bolt, or the hammer, and cocks the trigger. This one is the one that operates the magazine. So this piece here has to go behind the first one when you reinstall it. And the we'll see the bolt in a minute, has to go behind the back. Here's a ball. This is a 6mm ball. What I did is I ended up getting a set of metric balls because I lose a lot. So we'll set that aside in the ball. And that ball actually sits on a spring inside here. And if you're looking at it like that, the ball sits, the spring is underneath it, pushing the ball up against the bolt. And I think that's there just to make it easier to assemble and disassemble, so things don't fly out as when you take out the hammer spring guide. And that little spring is in there, and you may be able to see it. If I can get this up to the camera here. Yeah, see that spring on the bottom? And so what we do, let's see here, there it is. Spring is on the bottom. I'm trying to do this watching the camera, so it's a little awkward, but essentially you're going to grab the spring and pull it out, like so. But I find it easier at this point to go ahead and uncock it, like so, to release the tension on the hammer spring. Then what we would do is we would loosen the stock lug here and remove it. And then when you push the hammer back, it slides the spring guide and the hammer spring out the back. So that's all there is to that. For the hammer, or the striker, whatever you want to call it, there are a couple of pins in there. One is here, you can see, and we're going to take that one out first. And there it is. Yeah, another tap. So this comes out. Sometimes needs a little persuasion, like so. And then the hammer comes out the back, and there's your hammer right there. Right here is a clip, so we're going to pull that off. Right there. And there's a spacer too. I think it's a little aluminum spacer right there. Once those are out, then we can actually pull the spring off here, remembering that it goes in this orientation. And then this piece will come out. And we'll push this pin in. And what we're trying to do is get some room so we can get at this screw here. And what I've done is I actually cut off a wrench, and it makes it a little easier to fit it in there. So there we got that one started. Now I'm going to reverse the orientation again for the camera, and we're on the other side. This is the pin that I pushed out from the other side. So what we're going to do is take off this clip here, and on this one there is no spacer, at least on this gun, and I don't think on any of them. So there's the clip. It's the same size as the one on the other side. And we can take this spring out. Take note of the orientation, but it just comes off like so. And this one has a little dog leg on the end of it. Okay, then I'll generally push in that, and now we're ready to start this screw here. And all we're doing is giving ourselves a little bit of room to maneuver here. Otherwise it's kind of hard. You can use a ball end, but sometimes you need to get it started. And then the entire trigger unit will lift off. And then the safety itself where'd the ball go? So the ball isn't even in there. Here's the safety mechanism, and I'm not sure what happened to the ball. Oh, there it is. Okay, so there's the ball, there's the spring,